If you ache for truth, goodness, and beauty, if you're hungry for a Christianity with substance and strength, if you long for a faith that's big and bold and biblical and all about Jesus Christ, if you're inspired by the idea of one church that has spanned 20 centuries, 24 time zones, and 2 hemispheres, enfolding every race, nation, and language, then you're considering Catholicism. Okay, Corey. So in the last episode, which we just finished recording like 30 seconds ago, I kind of went off on a rant about how I don't think that Catholicism is a lot of times a competitive influence in the lives of our kids in the last couple of generations, and that's why it's lost out to the world. I know we don't like that, and we want to turn that around. Now, you as a parent of 4 young school-aged children have to make choices about how to make Catholicism the most competitive educational influence in their life. Okay? Yep. And so what I want you to do is talk about, in your generation, at your time, parent of 4 young kids, what are the different things that are available to you to make their Catholic education, their Catholic formation, as powerful, as competitive as it can be, to hopefully not lose them to the world, for lack of a better word. So, again, it starts with the home. You can talk about that. I mean, Pope Leo just released a letter yesterday where he reiterated that classic Catholic position about the domestic church, and it's in the parish and it's in the school, but there's a lot of options for all those things. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, and I'll just caveat it up front with the obvious fact that I am not an expert. I am figuring this out as I go along with my wife. We're trying to do the best we can. So, I mean, I will certainly express my understanding of the situation on the ground as best I can. And then along the way include opinions or assessments that are my own. Your mileage may vary, of course, but I'll try and be as objective as I can with walking through the different options that are available. But one thing that we have to start with, and that is pretty objective and incontrovertible from the church's viewpoint, is what we've already mentioned, that the parents, the mother and the father, are the primary educators of their children. That means both that they come first, but also that their role is primary all the way throughout, that it's fundamental. And so in a modern context here in the United States and in many other places as well, where we have a state-run school system, I think there is a tendency to think of education as something that the government is kind of primarily in charge of, and that the parents have some agency over, but it's kind of the government's thing, and, you know, the parents make sure that the kids are fed and clothed and loved and maybe taken to church or not. But it's kind of the government's thing to make sure that they're educated. But that's exactly backwards from the Catholic perspective.
So important point here, right, is not just that the parents come first in terms of like chronological sequence, right, but that they are the first and final authority, primarily responsible for the Catholic outcomes in children's life until they reach some level of, you know, adulthood or maturity or, you know, age of reason.
Yes, it is. I mean, obviously, with the obvious caveat of children are people too, and they have developing wills, and, you know, you can do everything right, and they may still choose to reject the faith. You don't have control over them like they're a marionette.
You don't have control, but you are. If somebody is responsible, right, you're responsible.
You are responsible. Yep, absolutely, 100%. You are responsible. And so the choices involved there are your choices. And the church has consistently exhorted parents to be deliberate and to be thoughtful and to be faithful in the choices that they make for the education of their children, broadly speaking, not just like what kind of schooling, but how they raise them to be Catholics, to be Christians, and to grow just in ordinary human formation. And so, the protagonist of the education of your children is the parents, the mother and father, or whoever, if, you know, in tragic situations in which the mother and father aren't both able to be there. Whoever has primary custody of these children, it should, in ordinary circumstances, that would be the mother and father. So that is.
Can I just two quick little additions to that?
Yeah.
Or questions, and one is I don't know how to answer it, but there's a lot of parents that feel inadequate to that because
I feel completely inadequate to that.
Well, right, but I mean, a lot of parents, I hear from a lot of them, like, I wasn't taught this really well. Like, I don't, how can I teach my kids something that I myself was not taught well? That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, the number of people that I hear from that say, I think that, but I have a spouse who completely disagrees. And so how do I do this when my spouse undermines what I try to accomplish? So I think that there's a number of things that go on in people's lives that make that primary responsibility difficult for them.
Yeah, it is not easy. When I say that it's clear who has the responsibility, that definitely doesn't mean that it's simple or easy. So I think it's a little simpler to respond to that first one about just feeling one's own inadequacy. I think unless we're some kind of arrogant, we should feel that inadequacy because that's a huge responsibility. I think all parents feel that at one stage or another, or many stages along the way, that they are not equipped for the task. And I think there's a few things to say about that. One is, and first and foremost, lean on God's grace. I mean, it is He who has given you this task through the sacrament of marriage. It's He who will equip you for it. Be in prayer, recognize your own weakness, and ask God to give you His strength for the task. There's no way to do it without that, certainly. Second would be to invest in your own education, because you can't educate someone else unless you can't give what you don't have. And so if you recognize the lack in your own formation and education, then start trying to make up for that. And I know that's a tall order, but there are lots and lots of resources these days for ongoing education. There's plenty of stuff on the internet that's available either for free or for pretty affordable prices. I'm sure your parish or other parishes around or Catholic organizations have resources or classes for ongoing formation of adults. Heck, most parishes will even let you sit in on their Order of Christian Initiation for Adults, their OCIA, what people who are new to the Catholic Church are going through to be formed and educated as Catholics, in order to sort of get remedial education in that sense. So if you're feeling inadequate, that's certainly something. And then it's a group effort. Yes, you have the primary responsibility for your children, but as the old saying goes, it does take a village. And so that's, learning from other parents, asking questions, learning from your own parents or people in the generations older than you who have done this well or have learned from their own mistakes. There's plenty of ways to try and make up for that lack. And yes, we're all going to make mistakes. I certainly have. I certainly will. But the key thing is to rely on God's grace, to use the resources that we have, and not just to kind of throw up our hands and be like, well, I guess I can't because it's hard.
Right. So,
and the other one that you brought up about if you're not in kind of harmony with your spouse about that one's much harder to address, because that's just a difficult situation. I mean, one to be met certainly with prayer and with trying to come to some kind of, settlement or a cooperative arrangement with the spouse if they don't agree, at least not to undermine what you're trying to do with your children or whatnot. That's a hard one, but my heart goes out to those people.
Every day at the parish, we have people who are requesting baptism for their children, right? Mm-hmm. And I end up having a conversation with the parent about the godparents. And are they practicing the faith, right? Because there's requirements to be a godparent. So I go through all the requirements. They come from canon law. But one of them is your godparent practicing the Catholic faith? Because we need a letter from that godparent's priest that says, yeah, I know this person, and they actually are living out their Catholic faith. And the reason I'm bringing this up is what the whole godparent principle there is to surround your child with models.
Right, to have someone who can help the parents to form that person, educate that person as a Catholic. Yeah,
you're right, and right, to be that other influence in their life, to say, look, at least your godparents are right, or the godparents can look at and do that. It takes a family, it takes people around you, it takes people around the child in their life, parents, godparents, that family, that domestic church, that is the foundation for their Catholic education.
Yeah, friends, people in the parish, all of that, the priests.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say you're doing the best job you can in the home. You're trying to set a good example, and part of it too is setting positive examples, but also not giving negative examples.
Right.
One of the worst things that happens is a family takes the kids to Mass on Sunday, and whatever influence might have been had for the hour of Mass is undone in the 10 minutes in the car ride home when the parents start talking or arguing or doing whatever. And wait a minute, didn't Father just talk about, this and this, and now we're walking out of here and, you're gossiping or you're saying bad things or you're doing whatever, right? So a lot of it is give positive but not negative examples. Okay, so let's suppose you're trying to do everything right. You're setting a good model for your kids. You've surrounded them with family and friends and godparents and, good playmates and, aunts and uncles and, the whole 9 yards, right? Yep. Now, the other three-legged stool of their Catholic education is the parish itself. I've often felt that a lot of parishes that have a Catholic school, right? The school exists to support the parish, not the other way around. Because with the life of the Catholic Church is lived in the parish. That's where we receive the sacraments. And the Catholic school is there to contribute and raise, remember that thing we talked about the last episode about raising good citizens? To raise good Catholics to serve the parish. The parish would continue without the school, but the school has no purpose unless there's a parish, unless there's a church. So part of it is the parish has a huge role to play here. Talk a little bit about parish education. So, most parishes are going to have a faith formation program. You're going to have sacrament prep at 2nd grade where they get prepped for their first communion, at 8th grade for confirmation. Talk a little bit about that.
Hey, I just want to take a moment to say that your support keeps this thing going. Look, this show is 100% listener supported. We don't run advertisements. And so if it's helped answer your questions or deepen your faith or moved you along the road to Rome, like it has for so many people that I hear from, would you click the PayPal donate button in the show notes or on the website at consideringcatholicism.com. Together, you and I, we can educate, equip, and excite more people about historic Catholic Christianity.
Yeah, so the church recognizes that the parents have the primary responsibility of educating their children, but that there are many ways that the church can help, and really has the obligation to help the parents and to support them in living out that vocation. And so that looks different in different contexts. As you say, there's usually some kind of program of religious education, especially for children and teenagers, but oftentimes for adults as well. A pillar of that is preparation for the sacraments. So for receiving First Communion and being able to start going to confession, and then later in preparation to receive the sacrament of confirmation, these important milestones in which Christ gives grace to us. And so that can look different things. That could be an hour on Sunday, or that could be a weeknight, or what have you. And those programs exist to support the parents. They're not what you would call mandatory. It's the parents' responsibility to make sure that their child is ready for the sacraments, that their child is learning how to be in the faith. And so there needs to be, a dialogue between the parents and the pastor about when the child is ready, to receive First Communion or whatnot. The normal way in most parishes, especially in the United States, that goes about is that the child either participates in the parish faith formation program, or there's some kind of conversation between the parents and the pastor, the outcome of which is we're going to handle this on our own.
That is extremely rare, by the way, just for those.
It is pretty rare. In America, we're pretty well institutionalized, but even canonically, like in canon law, that is the right of the parent. Like the parish is not canonically allowed to restrict sacraments based on hoop jumping for parish programming. Now, whether you want to fight that out or not is up to you. I'm not against parish programs by any means. My son recently went through the First Communion prep program at our parish, which is very good. But the church does, theoretically and formally recognize that it's the parents' responsibility. They have the choice of how much to engage with the programs that the parish sets up in order to help them in that.
I don't want to go down this rabbit trail, but you're right about canon law. But also, canon law recognizes the pastor has discretion to determine whether or not the child has received adequate formation. And 99% of the priests in America, at least, are going to say, how do I know if they've received adequate formation, preparation, if they haven't gone through? That's how I determine that. Right.
It's pretty well formalized in American parishes, especially because they tend to be so large that the pastor can't personally know every parent and child in there.
But be that as it may, right? Yeah. But like you say, they're going to receive those. The parish is going to have those opportunities. There's also opportunities just when they go every week to Mass for Catholic education. That should be taking place in the context of the Mass.
Right. Yeah. Because obviously the parent is bringing them to Mass. The parent is modeling how to participate in the Mass. Obviously, the rest of the congregation and the priests and everyone involved has a role in that formation as well. Active participation, integration into the life of the parish on a regular basis. Sundays are paramount, but also at other times is part of that education and formation as well.
One of the standard critiques of this, which has... how much merit you think this critique has probably depends on where you are and what parish you go to. But a pretty standard critique that you hear, at least in America and maybe in other countries, is that for a lot of parents, the sacrament prep faith formation programs, 2nd grade, 8th grade, right, for First Communion or confirmation, are basically getting your ticket punched. What a lot of parishes see is, and I'm not pointing fingers at any one parish or whatever, but this is so common. It's a cliche, but
it's pervasive.
Things become cliches because for a reason, right? Is that you don't see these people, they never come to Mass, but then all of a sudden there's a baby, and then it's like, okay, well, we need to have a baptism because grandma and grandpa are going to fly in and all the relatives, and there's going to be a big baptism. So they do the baptism, and then you will not see that kid until he's 7 years old. And then at 7 years old, grandma and grandpa and all the family and all that, they want the kid to have First Communion. And the girl's going to get a pretty dress, and the boy's going to get a suit, and there's going to be a huge party with presents. And so they need to have First Communion. And they're going to say, what can my kid do to get First Communion? And to your point about, well, I want my kid to have First Communion. And so parishes set up programs to say, we want to make sure they're adequately prepared because you haven't been coming to Mass for the last 7 years. Well, yeah, I know, but we're super busy and, blah, 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 blah. And so the parents will be like, what's the minimum we can do? And you're going to have the cliche is, well, is there just some kind of like one weekend or one Saturday workshop that I can drop my kid off and they get like a 6-hour, thing so they can get First Communion? No. We want to make sure they're adequately prepared. So they've got to go through 6 months of prep. This just feels like a real burden for us as a family that we have to bring the kid here every week, for an hour to do this. Anyway, so the kid gets First Communion. And then guess what? You're not going to see the kid until they're in 8th grade. And then they want to show up and they want confirmation. And I can tell you for a fact that I talk to confirmation directors who say, at the beginning of the year, I ask the kids, how many of you are here because your parents are making you do this? And like 99% of the, hands go up. And the kids are bored. They don't want to do it. They're being forced to do it by mom and dad, by grandma and grandpa. They have to go through confirmation class. The parents are like, it's a real burden for us to drive over here to the parish every week. for this confirmation class. Can't we just drop the kids off for like a quick workshop or something? No, you got to go through this program, blah, blah. They do the minimum. Then they get confirmed at age 13. There's the big thing. There's a party, the whole 9 yards for the kids. And then that may be the last time you see that kid in mass or see that family in mass for 10 years. And so I'm just trying to reiterate that there's this complex dynamic between the family being the parents and the family being primarily responsible for the Catholic education of their children, and the parish that's trying to do its best, but it can only influence your kids if you actually bring them. And if the message you give to the kids is, this is a thing you have to do to get your ticket punched, the kids will get their ticket punched and they have their sacraments, but I'm not sure that they were actually formed.
Well, yeah, it goes to what we said before, that anything that the parish can do is supportive of what the parents can do. It's not going to replace it. It's supplemental. It can be very good and important, but it's almost guaranteed to fail if it's not an addition to, a help to what the parents are doing. If the parents are doing squat about forming their children as Catholics, then the parish can't do much.
And a lot of times parish faith formation workers feel like they're at odds or fighting against the influence of the family. I mean, what we talked about the last episode about competing with the world and everything else.
Yeah.
That they're like, I'm just trying to impart anything to these kids with the minimum amount of minutes that I get with them, that the parents will bring them to the classes. And that's one of the reasons why a few minutes ago I said, a lot of the times the priest is going to say, I want the kid to go to the classes, or I'm going to determine they're not formed because I don't know what you're doing at home. So anyway, here's like the three-legged stool, right? You got the family, you've got the parish. Both of them have to work together and collaborate to have any kind of chance of really influencing the child in terms of a positive Catholic education, right? And that brings us to the third leg of the stool. So what do the kids do during the day, Monday through Friday? And so talk about the options. You're wrestling with this, right? Or, there's the Catholic day school. Do you send them to a parish school? Do you homeschool them? Do you send them to a charter school? Do you send them to, the public school and they just supplement it at home? Talk about all the different options that, you or people of your age today have before them.
Yeah. So there are a number of them. I would say kind of the first and foremost would be the Catholic school. The church developed the Western understanding of a school. It came out of the medieval monastic schools and universities, and then especially in the early modern period with a number of saints who pioneered primary and secondary schooling for children, both in Europe and in this country and in other places in the world. And so the church kind of has a preference maybe, or encourages parents to take advantage of Catholic schools, because this is a way that another way that the church tries to help and support the education that the parents are providing. And so there's a lot of parishes that have schools, especially grade schools, oftentimes either K through 5 or K through 8, sometimes K through 12 all the way through. And then dioceses often will have high schools for sort of regions of the diocese that kids can go to after they're done with the K through 8 school. There's a number of different models that these can follow, which we can talk about more if we want. But I think the church kind of has a presumption that if you're not sending your kids to the parish school, that you have a good reason, and that you're choosing something else that you've deliberately discerned is a good idea. The Catholic school is sort of the default assumption, I think. Now, that said, there's a big and growing homeschooling movement in this country and in a lot of other places as well. And the church, certainly where I am and in many other places, supports that as well, if it's done in a deliberately Catholic and faithful way. And I know personally, and just through talking to people, a lot of families that have done that, whether they're using a particular set of resources or whether they are part of a homeschool co-op. There are a number of parishes where I am and in many other places that run their own homeschool co-ops. So that's an explicitly Catholic homeschool co-op. This is an option that gives the parents even more sort of hands-on control and direction over their child's education, which is a good thing because the parent, as we've said many times now, is the primary educator. They're the one driving the bus for their kids' education. It's a model that involves less delegation, less cooperation with other entities, whether that's the parish, school, or some other school, which has pros and cons, practical pros and cons. Obviously, not every family is able to make that work with whatever, job or jobs are happening or just dispositions. Just personally, like my wife and I admire a lot of things about the homeschooling model, but it really doesn't work for us. A lot would have to change about our life to make that viable. And so we send our kids to the parish school, which we think is a great school and a great option. So there are definite pros and cons, and I think it's a discernment that the family has to make in prayer and in serious thought about what makes the most sense for their family. So those would be kind of the two main explicitly Catholic options for education. And then there are Catholic families who send their kids to public schools, to charter schools, to other kinds of schools. And again, I think that just has to be a discernment that the family does. I'm personally very cautious about that just because what I know of the materials that are being used in a lot of public schools and the culture of a lot of public schools, the influence of worldly ways of thinking are pretty strong in many of those cases. But I also know of Catholic families who have felt called in that direction to be a witness in that environment and who are deliberately trying to form their children, not just, sending their kids to public school and hoping for the best, but doing religious education in the parish and in the family and going in with their eyes wide open about that and not having any illusions about the challenges that involves. So, the Catholic Church doesn't forbid you from sending your kids to public school or whatnot, but I think there are a lot of issues or potential pitfalls with that.
Well, I agree, and as someone who has our first grandchild on the way, right? We have a lot of opinions or thoughts, but we're not in control of that, right? So
you can be part of that village, part of that influence on. Yeah,
we will be an influence, right? But the point is that it's their decision, right? We respect that. But the point I'm trying to make is each family is going to wrestle with that. And how do I want to say this? A lot of this is anecdotal, about not all public schools or all charter schools are equal in terms.
Oh, sure. There's a lot of variety,
a lot of diversity in terms of where you are in the country, where you are in the state, where you are in the city.
Even just what school in the city. Yeah.
What school in the city, what the communities are really different. You can be in a place where you've got really decent, pretty good public schools in a particular town, and the city next door has terrible public schools. But I also think that, back to what we were talking about in the earlier episode about competing with the noise. Let me put it this way. I wouldn't say, if someone is going to send their child to a public school or a charter school, then it places the ball at the end of the court of the family and the parish to compete with whatever they're getting in that public school.
Right? And you're fighting a much more uphill battle with that.
Yeah, versus having. Yeah, agreed.
In our country, historically, first the public schools were Protestant in orientation. Yep. And now they're secular in orientation.
Yep.
And that isn't a neutral thing.
No disagreement. That's my point, is they're getting all this other education. So what I'm saying is, if that's the direction that you're going to go, then it puts an additional burden on the family and the parish to make sure that they are a bigger influence in the kid's life than whatever the public they're getting during the day at the school. That's easier if what they're getting during the day at school is congruent with what they're getting at home. Of course, that gets flipped too, because there's people who send their kids to the Catholic school that are not doing what they should be doing at home. And a lot of times those are the people who say, hey, I sent my kids to Catholic school and it didn't work out, and you go, well, yeah, all three legs of the stool have to, be operating, right?
Yeah, it certainly does happen that someone will kind of phone it in on forming their children in the faith at home, and then be mystified why the Catholic school wasn't able to succeed where they didn't even try.
Yeah.
But it does happen on the other side too.
Yeah.
In that there are Catholic schools, and then there are Catholic schools. I mean, the church, of course, is an institution run by fallible people, just like the others.
There are some amazing Catholic schools, and then
there are Catholic schools that unfortunately are not doing a great job at forming kids to be Catholics.
There are some Catholic colleges that are really great, and there's some Catholic colleges that are not great, right? So
again, it's up to the parents to be able to choose. Like, if your parish school is great, then by all means. If your parish school is not great, then you might want to think about other options. It's really very a local decision.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the cost of Catholic education. So here you are, hardworking guy who just bought a house and works for a parish and has 4 children going to Catholic school. So, the elephant in the room is Catholic school costs money and the public school is free. So talk about...
you're already paying for it through your taxes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you don't get a break by, that's...
Right. Yeah, exactly. It costs more to send your kids to Catholic school.
So what do you... I mean, I'm not asking for your particular circumstances, but I mean, talk about how anybody out there who's wrestling with that question.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a big deal. And I feel that myself. I mean, it isn't cheap. And I don't make it, I'm not getting rich working for the church. I do get discounts for Catholic school working through the church, so there's a loophole. But it can be a sacrifice. And the question that families have to ask is that sacrifice worth it? I believe that Catholic education is a sacrifice that is worthwhile, because it's one of my greatest responsibilities in life to form my children well. Especially in the faith, and I want to do it as best as I can. So it may mean, not having as much disposable income for other things. But then there are people who, it's not the choice between not going on a vacation or going on a vacation. It's a choice between eating or not eating. In which case, Catholic schools generally have really good approaches to financial aid and scholarships. Our bishop here in the Diocese of Lansing is fabulous about this. He's really supportive of Catholic education and really wants to make it affordable to any family in the diocese that wants to send their kids to Catholic school. And so he's done a lot of, capital campaign fundraising and support for schools to try and make that possible, to have scholarships for families who wouldn't be able to afford it on their own. So what the main thing I would say to families thinking about it and worrying about the financial aspect of it is look into it. Don't assume you can't afford it. Don't assume that you wouldn't be given the financial aid that you would need, because I couldn't send my kids to Catholic school unless I received assistance with that.
Absolutely.
On the income that I have, and I am. I'm doing it. I've been able to do it with the help that we received from the diocese. Right. So look into it.
Okay, so I'm going to let you have last words here as we're winding this 2-episode conversation about Catholic education up as a father of 4. What final thoughts would you have for anyone else out there who's in your position?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is just to realize the gravity of the responsibility of being the primary educator of your children. And it's a big thing, not to be intimidated by it. but to rely on God's grace in order to be able to do it, and the support of the church that ideally always wants to have your back in fulfilling that responsibility to form your children well, to do it prayerfully and thoughtfully and deliberately. I think that's the biggest thing, is that if you phone it in, if you just assume that it's going to happen and you go on autopilot, it's not going to happen, or it's just going to be a miracle that it happens, that your children are well educated and well formed in the faith. You have to make choices, and they might be difficult choices. They're going to be conditioned by the situation on the ground where you live, what your parish is like, what the Catholic schools are like, what the other options are, whether you're equipped to homeschool or not. And that's going to look different for different people. I think that obviously there are good, better, and best decisions that any particular family can make, and we shouldn't jump to conclusions about what might or might not be the best option for any particular person. But it's doing it intentionally and looking into what your options are and trying to pick the best one, because ultimately, as part of your the sacrament of marriage that God has given you, you have a great responsibility for your children. And we all love our children and want what's best for them. And this is the most important thing, or perhaps one of the most important things that we can do for them, is to help them to be well educated, and especially to be pointed in the right direction, not just in a worldly sense, but in an eternal sense, for the good of their soul, for both now and in the age to come. So I would just encourage parents to sort of take the reins of that and do things deliberately.
Right on. Well, thank you, Corey, and keep doing what you're doing, and you're doing a great job. And
that's right. Thank you.
And appreciate you coming on this evening. I know it's getting kind of late, and you've got 4 little kids, so you got to get up in the morning and
to get to the Catholic school.
Get to the Catholic school. So we'll have you back on again soon here. I think we're setting up a regular schedule for recording here, and so
yes,
Corey's going to be back to being a regular part of the show. So looking forward to that. God bless, and for all of you out there, keep considering Catholicism.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back with another episode soon. But before you go, can I quickly ask you to do 5 things? First, please rate the podcast on whatever platform you listen on. That really moves it up in search rankings. Second, please write a review on either Apple Podcasts or on our website, consideringcatholicism.com. That encourages others who are searching for a Catholic podcast to try this one out. Third, please share it with others. Send them a link or post an episode on your social media. Fourth, please write me at consideringcatholicism.com or leave a comment on our website. I'd love to hear your comments, your questions, and your stories. And finally, this podcast is 100% donor supported. My donors keep me going, they help cover my costs, and they let me dedicate more time to researching, writing, recording, and editing to get the episodes out to you faster. So please consider giving a one-time or recurring donation through the links in the show notes or on the website so that this ministry can continue and grow. And never forget, Christus vincit, Christus regnat, and Christus imperat.